Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Java tutorial. And hopefully, this is going to be the last tutorial for chapter 2. But we've got a couple of topics left to cover, and one of those is combined assignment operators. And Java is a wonderful language that will allow you to use those. And it's not required. If you don't want to use them, you don't have to use them, but they just shorten your code overall, and they're just very simple to use. So, as you can see here, this one is equivalent to this one. So instead of typing x equals x plus 5, so if we want to add 5 to the old value of x, we can just do x plus equal 5. The same thing with the minus, y minus equal 2. Instead of typing it out, y equals y minus 2 with the multiplication, with the division, and with the modulus. So if you want to do any of these operations to your old value and assign it to the new value of the same variable, you can do these and you can use these. These are very useful. I strongly recommend. Now, the next thing that we're going to cover are constants in Java, and we've seen constants already before when we were in Python. And just a quick refresher, constant is a variable that will not be changed, so it's going to keep the value that you assign to it for the whole remainder of your program. Nothing will be able to change that variable, and it's just a good practice to use those constants if your program requires them, instead of just making a regular variable. So these are a couple of things to be mindful about. So your constant will keep your program organized, and it's going to be easier to maintain because of the word final. And you will place the keyword final in front of any variable declaration that you want to make. So this is an example how it will look like. And one thing, constants are all uppercase letters. As you can see here, calculate sales tax variable, it is all capital letters, and the only thing is it's separated by is the underscore character. And as you can see here, if we get rid of this final, if we just don't look at it, we have a regular variable declaration in Java, right? Our data type, our name, and then the equal sign and whatever value we want it to have with the semicolon at the end. However, what makes it a constant is that we have the word final right here and that the name is all caps. That's the only difference. Congratulations, you now know how to create constants in Java. Nothing really too complicated. So now let's talk a little bit about the string class. And remember, I told you about primitive data types in Java, which are int, float, and a couple of others. So string is not considered a primitive data type in Java. String is considered a class. It's considered a string object. So a variable that we're going to create, it will look the same as if when you would create your regular variable with other data types such as integer or a double. However, the S is capital in string right here. And why that is because the class names should always begin with an S. And since our variable is technically a string object, as you can see here, a string object, it's going to be referencing a class. And that's why the S is capital, because we are creating a new object from a class. And as you can see here, this is a primitive variable with a primitive data type, just number equals 25. So 25 will be actually stored in memory that's going to be associated with this variable called number. But objects are not like that. Whenever we work with objects, what we call them is that objects are referenced by variables. So they do not store any information in the locations that's associated with that variable. We only reference those objects by our variables. And what that means is quite simple. So instead of just having a location specifically for this variable, we have this variable that's going to send us an address to the object, and then that object will have a location, and that object will store Charleston. And you don't have to fully understand it. The only thing that you need to know is that whenever we use strings, the variable is actually referencing the object instead of just simply storing the value in some sort of location. So as you can see here, this would be your variable, the way we would create a string variable. And what we do, we say capital string, then whatever name we have equal, and then we assign whatever string we wanted to have. However, this is the only object that can be created this way. All of the other objects have to be created this way. And you will see it later on. It's going to make sense to you a little bit more. So if it doesn't make sense to you now, don't stress, don't panic. It's all good. We're going to cover objects in Java a little bit more later on. However, you have to be familiar with this. This is the way you would create instances of objects, and what you would do, you would put the class, in this case is string, the class name, then whatever name you wanted to have, in this case is value, equals a keyword new, and then you would create, you would put another time, you would put a class name, the same as here, they should be matching, and then parentheses and whatever you want this object called value to have. I know it's a little bit confusing, value and value. I'm sorry about that, but I hope it made a little bit of sense. So since our string is actually an object, is actually a class, so all of the objects of the instances of string, they will have each own methods. And in this case, the string class provides you with the method called length. And what length does, it will just tell you how many characters exist in that string that is passed to this object. There are many other string methods that we'll be covering in a little bit in a different lecture, but just so you know that the string class will provide you with many useful methods for manipulation of strings. However, in Java, string objects, you cannot change them, so they're called immutable. You cannot change them. However, there are many methods in the string class that will let you manipulate the string object by creating new versions of that same object. So now let's talk about scope. I think this is the last topic in chapter 2. Scope, again, we covered it already. Remember local variables and global variables. Recall that lecture in PLD 101. So scope just refers you to the part of the program that has access to any variable's contents. And in simple language, if you have a method and you have a variable that's inside of that method, nobody else will see that variable. Nobody else will have access to that variable. That variable only belongs to that method. So its scope is within that method. All that is to scope. And yeah, remember local variables and global variables. Global variables are the ones that are declared in your main class. Local variables that are declared inside of your methods. So here is a neat thing that you can do while working with Java. Instead of putting a data type, if you don't know, or I don't know why you wouldn't know, but in case you don't know the data type of your variable that you wanted to have, you can use var. Just that stands for variable, VAR, then the name of your variable, and then you have to initialize it to some sort of value. So this way you will let your compiler know that you want your amount to have a value of 100, and your compiler will figure it out that 100 is an integer. However, you have to put this keyword in the front. Here are some other examples. See that we do in interest rate, we're assigning it to 12, which is going to be a double. Then we're assigning stock code to a string, and we're assigning limit to a long. Since we have an L at the end, we're assigning it to a long. However, there are some limitations that are coming with the usage of var. You can only use it when you declare local variables. You cannot use it to declare multiple variables in the same statement. If you watch the previous videos, you should have seen that you can declare multiple variables in one line. So you cannot use it with var, you cannot do it. And you have to provide an initialization value. You have to provide some sort of value whenever you're using var. You cannot just declare a variable and then initialize it later. That's not going to work. However, you can do that with any other data types. So these are just 3 things that you should be aware of if you're using var. Alright, commenting code. We've covered it a little bit before, but these are just your regular comments. So whenever you use the double slash, it's going to be a single line comment. Everything after the double line is going to be ignored by your compiler. Now, these are called block comments. So everything between the first slash and a star, in the middle, until the star and a slash is going to be ignored. So you can use you can use this if you want to block, make a block of comment. And then java.comments, this is something a little bit different. So java.comments are actually are used for creating a separate file of documentation, and I will show you what that looks like. So it's going to be an HTML file. So it's going to be HTML documentation. And this is what it will look like. So whenever you create your java.comments, you're going to get a full-on web page with generated documentation for your code. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it. But I just want you to be familiar that there's a thing such as java.comments. And just a couple more things. So whenever you code, even though Java is very strict with its syntax, and again, another reminder, whenever you're working on your quizzes and your labs, just make sure that everything that the question is asking you, that you're following it to a T, that you're following it as it says. So just be aware that Java is a very strict syntax type of language. However, whitespace characters are going to be ignored by your compiler, and whitespace characters are space, tab, new line, carriage return, and form feed. However, you still have to pay attention whenever you're typing to proper indentation. So your each block of code should be indented a few spaces from its surrounding block. And what it means is whenever you use the curly braces, remember that we have curly braces? Everything that's inside of the curly braces should be indented by a couple of spaces. Tab characters should be avoided, because tabs are different just in size between applications and devices, and you never know what you're going to get. So 2 to 4 spaces, just make an indentation. Usually, I think that the program that you're going to be using for your quizzes is going to indent that block for you, so you shouldn't worry about that. Just one thing to know. Oh, and the last thing is going to be the scanner class. So you know how in Python we had just a keyword input to store any type of input from our user, right? We would just have to do input, and it would automatically assume that we are trying to get input from the keyboard. However, Java is different, and Java is gonna make it harder for you. First of all, scanner is a class, and scanner is defined in java.util. And what that means is that you actually have to import it, and you will put this sentence in front of your class declaration, on top of your class declaration. So this will be on top of your program. You're going to be importing java.util.scanner. You're going to let your compiler know that you want to use this, and that you will be taking some sort of input from somewhere, in this case from the user. And remember I talked about system.out, so in this case we're going to use system.in, because system.in means keyboard, basically. So that it just means that you want to get input. Remember, in stands for input, out stands for output. Now, you will have to create a scanner object whenever you want to use scanner to get some input from the user. And what you're gonna do, you're gonna put the same way as I showed you with strings, remember? So we would do scanner, the name of our class, then whatever word you wanted to have, then there's gonna be equals, new, then the name of the class again, in this case scanner, and then you will open your parentheses and put system.in inside of the parentheses with the semicolon in the end.